Start. Says you're live. Just minimize it. Do your thing.
Okay, I'd like to call the January 19th, 2022 special call city council meeting for the city of Lake City to order. Everyone will stand for the pledge of allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for your many blessings. We ask you for your guidance today to continue to conduct the business of our community. We ask that what we do is pleasing in your eyes and in the best interest of our community. And in your name we pray. Amen. Excited for you to call the roll.
Mr. Hill?
Here.
Mr. Jefferson?
Here.
Mr. Sampson?
Here.
Mayor Witt?
Here.
Mr. Coberline?
Here.
Mr. Dial?
Here.
Chief Butler?
Here. Ladies and gentlemen, the Lake City Council has opened this public meeting since 1968. The city code has prohibited any person from making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks or becoming boisterous while addressing city council. Yelling and making audible comments from the audience constitutes boisterous conduct. Such conduct will not be tolerated. There is only one approved manner of addressing the city council. That is to be recognized and speak from the podium. We have approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion, second to approve the agenda is published. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Persons wishing to address council, I have only one. That would be Mr. Glenell Ballard.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Council. I just wanted to rise and make the same observation I made in front of Mr. Adams' interview, and that is I wish the candidates could have been interviewed on the same day. I know you all share that same view. I did want to express that same concern in front of Mr. Thomas' interview. I think the process has gone fairly smooth. It seemed disjointed from a public perspective, from my view. It didn't go as smooth as I had hoped it would have, but we are where we are. And so I look forward to this interview. But I did want to go on the record to say that I think the public would have been better served had it been a greater effort made to get both candidates here on the same day, so the public could have had an opportunity to see them back to back on the same day, to digest the interview process on that same day. But that didn't happen, so we move forward from there. But I want to make that observation, Mr. Mayor, since I made that observation in front of Mr. Allen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move into new business. Ms. Norlock, would you like to come up and get us going?
Good morning, Mayor. Morning, council members.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. So we have Mr. Thomas here, one of our finalists for the city manager position. And as you are aware, Mr. Thomas came in yesterday and met with the department directors. He had a meeting with the department directors. It was a good meeting. Lasted about an hour. Prior to that, he'd taken a tour of the community, similar to what our candidate did last week. And then we also had a meet and greet yesterday that lasted for about an hour prior to the council meeting. This morning, he's met with each of you for about 30 minutes, one-on-ones. And then now it's time for him to have a public interview with the full council. I will just remind you that you have some questions in front of you that we put together, same questions that were given to you last week. You can use them or not. They're just for your convenience. We're not telling you to ask those questions. This is a time where you get to ask more pointed questions, specific questions to Mr. Thomas about Mr. Thomas. And so that said, I will remind you of questions that we cannot ask. It's by federal law, there are certain questions that you cannot ask candidates, and that includes any questions related to age, race, ethnicity, color, national origin, religion, marital status, gender identity, sex, disabilities, etc. It's a long list of questions. I'll be in the room. Should we broach any of those subjects, and I'll throw my flag. I'll be sitting in the back, but I'll throw my flag. That said, just be mindful of that. We will do a debriefing, or we'll meet after his interview is finished. I will just let you know that he has a plane to catch this afternoon. So as soon as his interview is over with, he'll be heading out after his interview to be able to catch a plane. But we'll meet again and we'll have some discussion then about our next steps. So with that said, if everybody's ready, I'll bring Mr. Thomas up.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
It's the hot seat right here, Thomas. There's a bottle of water.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, again, I'd like to thank you for coming here and participating in this, and we appreciate you traveling and giving us the opportunity to meet you and talk with you. We'll be asking questions, and if everybody's in agreement, we'll start with Mr. Hill and just work our way around like we did before. So I'll let Mr. Hill go first.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Thomas.
Good morning.
Could you tell us a little bit about your utility experience?
Yes, I've had the opportunity to manage the city that had the full service utilities during my time as manager of Alaska. We had water, sewer, electric utility, trash collection. So we had all the full service utilities. And because of where we were located in the Bering Sea, we had to have our facilities up to grade and standard all the time because there were no mutual agreements because we were 2 or 3 days out on flight from someone reaching us. So we were full service utilities, worked on setting rates, capital improvement projects of our facilities and everything.
Okay, thank you.
Follow-up question to that. Did the full service utilities, did that include gas?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Well, okay. Thank you.
You know what that noise is? That noise.
Fire alarm in the blank.
Oh, at the plant?
Just the fire alarm.
Over this. Oh, never mind. Anyway,
Okay. What do you perceive as opportunities and challenges facing the city of Lake City?
Well, the ongoing challenges is also I see as opportunities. The challenges as an organization, trying to recruit and maintain good qualified and employees, trying to be competitive with once you recruit those employees and keeping them here, having to look short-term and long-term at your pay scale and the issues regarding longevity pay to keep them here. Short-term, long-term, looking at the issues of the growth that you're in the upswing on and going to continue to have, but trying to focus it in on having smart growth, working with the county to make sure that you have mutually beneficial agreements when you're looking to bring in potential residential and commercial development in your community that not only benefits the city and the county, but also doesn't bear too much of the cost on the citizens here because they are the primary customer. So just a few of the opportunities and things that I've observed here.
Thank you.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
I have the next question for you. So you've had the opportunity to tour the city a little bit. I know not a whole lot. And you got to meet several community members at our meet and greet and out and about and the staff. What have you learned about the city?
Well, what I have learned is, like any city, you have a long history of issues of concern, but also issues of accomplishments. You deal with the issues of sections of your community that have been underserved and how you go about addressing those issues in the long term. You have issues, you have areas in the community that are on the upswing, that are continuing to grow, and you have to find ways to address those issues with the growth in the infrastructure. And also, I found a community that's very united in its vision and like living here and proud of their community. I haven't encountered anyone who says, despite they may have made some negative comments, who want to leave. They want to stay here, continue to fight, and continue to improve things. So just 100-foot level, what I'm looking at, and that's what I've observed.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Thomas, I have the next question for you here. If you were hired for this position, what characteristics would be important to you? And how did your skills match those characteristics?
Well, I think the skill set that I bring is being very strategic in my approach and how I look to do things. I've had the opportunity to observe quite a few of your meetings online and had the opportunity to sit in on your meeting last night. And much of what you're focused in on now is, I think the phrase I would use is day trading. You're managing day-to-day type things as they come up. Strategically, you need to start focusing in on goal setting on an annual basis. What you want to accomplish the next year and what you want to accomplish the year after that. And doing a 1-2 day retreat to do those types of things. How this helps you is it helps to build some sort of consensus and unity with the council and a level of camaraderie. It begins to help you focus on separating wants from needs. It also begins to help you focus in on what you can realistically accomplish in that next year as you go through that retreat, because as you bring up ideas and thoughts, the manager along with staff starts telling you, well, realistically, we can't do that. We can do this, and it's not. So it begins to help you accomplish a lot of those different types of things. So when things come up, you're confronted with issues. You have parameter, knowing we can't do this now, but we can aim for this in year 2 or year 3. So being more strategic, and that's something I spent a great deal of my career involved in strategic financial planning, being involved in development of 3 comprehensive land use plans, doing visioning for downtowns and communities. And I've always gone to that type of approach because it helps me get a parameter, it helps me better plan, and it helps me better prepare for the unexpected, and the unexpected will happen.
Thank you.
Next question, Mr. Thomas. Could you elaborate on your financial experience?
Well, I began my career as a budget analyst at the city of Tallahassee, Florida. And since then, every place I have worked, I have been involved in either helping to develop the budget, developing the 5-year capital plan. I've had the opportunity to work in organizations that are in financial crisis because of my experience with zero-based budgeting, performance-based budgeting. I've had the ability to develop a budget from the ground up, being able to come to an organization, look at the budget that's in place, look at the actual spending, be able to pull in the different department directors, separate the ones from the needs, see what their potential opportunities for savings. And that is perhaps my greatest strength, my financial acumen.
Thank you.
How can a city manager best support an elected board? Additionally, how can a board best support a city manager?
Either?
Well, I think in many ways that does begin with the city manager. I try to establish those individual relationships with the mayor and the council members. I try to, if possible, don't let at least 2 weeks go by without at least trying to have those sort of one-on-one meetings with you. Try to find out what motivated you to run for office and try to figure out what you want to accomplish while you're in office. And secondly, try to see about things I can help you accomplish in your wards and help you be successful and operations-wise that may not necessarily be a policy decision that has to be made up on the dais here. So the emphasis on me to establish those relationships, how you like to communicate, when you want to communicate,
We can hear him.
what motivated you to run for office, and the things you want to try to accomplish, and establish that relationship of communication. That helps me. That also helps you be successful as well. So that's my initial approach, how I want to do those types of things.
Okay, thank you.
The next question is, by the first 90 days, 6 months, and first year, what would you expect to have accomplished as the city manager of Lake City?
Well, the first 90 days, hope to have a full understanding of department directors and the operations. Have a good idea of their strengths and weaknesses and areas I can help them begin to improve on. Areas where they have strengths, where they can take the lead in, that'll give me freedom to focus in on other things. Get a full understanding of their day-to-day operations and the challenges they're dealing with. Begin to establish some level of having weekly meetings with department directors, start to develop some level of synergy working with them. That's my experience, because department directors, they're running their departments, especially you have external services that you're providing. Sometimes you can tend to work in a silo. And if we have those weekly meetings, we can start working together as a team, figure out if there's some issues that the department is dealing with. Maybe there's another department that can help them, assist them to be successful. So those weekly meetings are critical, and developing that team attitude of how we're going to approach and getting things done and being successful. Going from that, the 90 days, sort of have a general idea, having those relationships with the mayor and council members, trying to figure out what they're needing. That can help me in setting work session items to bring before you to have discussions on issues that we need to address that may not necessarily need to come for a vote, but we can have that sort of public discussion on. We can brainstorm on. And sometimes a work session item can take 2 or 3 before we bring it to the point we want to have a vote on. So you don't feel that pressure, I got to vote on something this day. After the first 6 months, I would have hoped to have a full understanding of the financial situation, begin to help me beginning to plan for the next year. Probably would have had your buy-in regarding doing the goal setting, the retreat, knowing how you communicate, and finally, after the first 6 months, probably have a full understanding of the culture of your community, because that's always unique to wherever you're living, and knowing the do's and don'ts of what makes you unique here and how things work here.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Thomas, what does the term community engagement mean to you? And how do you build trust with the community?
Well, there's many ways I approach that. I've always had a policy, have an open door policy. If I'm an available citizen who wants to schedule time to meet with me, I'll meet with them in my office to discuss issues of concern they may have. Finding ways to put out ways of information to the community. Maybe doing something in lines of a monthly management report or things of that nature. Establishing how I communicate with the mayor and council, making sure I have your sort of a group email, group text, so issues of concern come up, emergency issues, things of that nature. I can get that information to you in a timely manner. So when the citizen contacts you about something, you won't be caught flat-footed not knowing what's going on in your community. So those communication skills, being visible, understanding it's a 24/7 job, being an active in not only just city-related functions, but non-city. Other places that I've worked, I've been involved in Rotary. I've been involved with the chamber, where you get to meet key decision makers in your community, find out those type of issues they're dealing with, and being visible. That's part of it as well.
And Mr. Mayor, as a follow-up to that, or in addition to that, do you have a problem, and how do you feel about meeting with the public and facing the public in their environment?
Well, yeah, I've worked in many places where we've done ward meetings, where you go out to different locations and meet with citizens and talk about issues of concern. And amazingly, in my experience, you found out sometimes you get more turnout in those types of situations because coming to a council meeting and all of you sitting up on your dais and the cameras on can be a very intimidating place for a citizen to come in and talk about their issue. But if you take it to a ward area, someplace in their community, a rec facility, or someone has room in their home and you have a meeting there, you tend to loosen up and they tend to express issues and you tend to sometimes get more information. And also, you meet citizens you've never met before. So I've done those type of ward meetings where you go out and meet with people discussing specific issues and you're able to plan a list of issues, certain particular issues, during purpose of public safety, you have police chief there, public works, you have the public works director there, and you have that kind of discussion about those issues in that neighborhood or in that ward.
Thank you.
Okay, I know I'm speaking of echo, so I want to make sure, okay. Okay,
Should be where it won't be echoing too much.
Mr. Thomas, my question is, hands down, you and Mr. Adams was the better of the four candidates. Explain to me, explain to the council, what sets you apart from Mr. Adams?
I'm not familiar with the background of that candidate. I don't do that, just focus on myself and what I'm presenting. What I can tell you about myself is I have 25 years of experience working in local government, working at probably nearly every level. I've been a budget analyst, a planner, an assistant county manager, an assistant to the city manager, a city manager. I've worked in about 5 different states, having a discipline of learning how those different states and local governments work. And I think that and also working in local governments in the state of Florida as well. And I think that many years of experience with coming to your organization would be an asset, giving you a diverse background of different types of ways and perspectives of approaching doing things.
Okay, thank you.
How would you establish rapport with existing staff and gain their support for a new leadership style?
Well, I mentioned before those first 90 days, meet with department directors, try to tour their facilities, their departments, try to meet all the city employees. That's critical. Try to find out the little things they're involved in, the things that are success, the things that are failing, what I can do to help them accomplish those types of things. And overall, those weekly directors meetings, when as a group we meet, we establish how we're going to accomplish things. We normally meet, I normally try to schedule it after the day after the council meetings, where we reflect on the council meeting before that, follow up on the issues that were discussed at the council meetings, so make sure nothing is missed. Then we talk about the weekly operations, things that we're dealing with from the week before that we need to follow up on, and things we need to aim for going into the future. That's a phenomenal way of building up those relationships, building up that synergy, sharing of information. And those weekly meetings are critical.
So you have weekly meetings with the staff?
Yes, I do weekly meetings with department directors, and if certain department directors need to meet with me one-on-one about specific issues, I do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
It also helps with agenda planning and planning out work sessions and agenda items, well, sometimes for a month ahead of time.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Thomas, in your diverse experience, one thing I would like for you to touch on, you have experience with economic development and with the growing city, and what can you give us in that background?
Well, I've had experience with in different places, working with developers, bringing in potential retailers, being involved in bringing in super Walmarts, Bass Pro Shops, things of that nature. I've been involved in getting sites ready, making sure they have the utilities in place, the road access, things of that nature. But I've also been involved in working in those intergovernmental type agreements between cities and counties, sharing of those resources. So when potential developers are looking at sites, we work together to have a site ready and prepared to market, because that's what developers most of the time look for. When they have a potential business, they've done all their research. They've narrowed it down to 2 or 3 locations. They want to have that site ready in case they make the decision to go in there. And they want to have a sense of the local governments working together to help them be successful. And that can be perceived as a negative if they see that intergovernmental relationship not working well. Because they think about that not only for now, but in the future. They want to do future build outs of their business there.
I have a little follow-up to that, Mayor.
Sure.
So, talking about places you've been in the past where the city and the county work together, do you have experience where they may have been looking at different goals but bringing them together? Is there anything like that you could elaborate on?
Oh, yes, there was always issues about the access to the sites, who was going to share in those costs. And we have those discussions. Whoever the utility provider, company understanding about the cost for getting the access to the site and how those costs are estimated out. And we discuss who's going to build out the cost, when is the return on the revenue is being projected out by the utility, and those kinds of discussions I've been involved in figuring out. And we bring the directors involved in that, and we have those kind of discussions about how we're going to build it out and how we get a return on that investment. And also, we also have to bring each other into their confidence. We understand that everything has to be confidential, but if we're working on a potential site for a potential developer, we also have to bring into each other's confidence, because sometimes we may have had experience with that potential developer. We might share vital information to help that project be successful.
Thank you.
Mr. Thomas, I have a hypothetical question here. If a letter to the editor appeared in the local newspaper criticizing you or one of your departments, if you were the manager, how would you respond to that, if any?
Well, it would depend on what the issue is. If it's an operational issue, I would review it. If it's something I wasn't aware of, I'd find out more detail about it. But something I was aware of, I would separate the fact from the fiction. Because I've been in local government so long, I built up a pretty good threshold to pain. So I'm sort of slow to react because something is written in the paper. Reporters have a functioning role in our government, just like we do. Something is written, it's freedom of the press. They have the ability to write something. But if something is written that is erroneous and is brought to my attention that is having an impact on service delivery that is inaccurate, then I may feel the need to address it from that specific narrow view on it. But I don't address issues in regards to personal attacks. I've been through that. That's part of being, a public employee, and you're going to get those kinds of personal attacks. You focus in on if the issue is about a service that you're providing, some issue of concern, and you have to address that. So citizens understand what they're paying for is being delivered properly.
Thank you.
Mr. Thomas, if you were selected, when would you be able to start?
Well, I would first have to have a discussion with my wife about the timetable. Most likely, I would come and start on my own for the first couple of months, and then the family would come later on. So I would probably look to start probably in the first 2-3 months, depending. I can find some place to live.
Thank you.
Okay. As you mentioned earlier, I think, and we've talked about, there's an issue with government providing competitive salaries, but also keeping the tax rate low. How do you find ways to, increase salaries or keep employees without raising taxes a lot?
Well, you have to begin to think creatively. For instance, if you invest in an employee to bring them on board, you pay for them to go through all the training and certification, they become a full-time employee. Maybe you need to begin to negotiate. You have to at least give us a minimum of 2 years before you look to leave. Or if you don't, you got to pay back that money. Things like that I've looked at creatively to get around it. Secondly, the salary, you may have to come up with a pay plan. You may have to find a way to try to phase in over a longer period of time. Third, for employees that are already there, you need to start thinking about potentially implementing long-term or sort of a longevity type plan, so that when you bring in some new potential employees, they're not being brought in above someone's been here or equal to someone's been here a long time. So there are about a 3-4 pronged approach that you could take to do it and phasing it over a longer period of time. And those are some of the things I've done that I've seen to be successful.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Thomas, so you had mentioned the communication in the meetings, and as far as like you mentioned something about a retreat. Could you expand on that a little bit, what the thought process is on that?
Well, what I've done in other places is we set aside maybe 2 or 3 days on Friday or Saturday. We bring in a consultant to work with us, and we sit around and we whiteboard some big issues that we want to focus in on. And as we go through the list, we begin to narrow down what those issues are, getting into the detail. And the big part of it is we begin to build a consistency between the mayor and council of what they want to focus on that first year, and then potentially dovetailing into that second year. How that helps is, while a council member may have been pushing for something, they may realize there's no consensus from the other council about that as a potential annual goal. And sometimes as a group, you begin to make those kinds of adjustments and you begin to work on those relationships, how you want to approach that. That's also helpful for the city manager, because that's something as a goal I'm going to be using for setting goals in regards to the department directors to get things done. And thirdly, it's something I can be evaluated on as a city manager for that first year or the second year going forward. Separating the need from the want, what's realistic, is also crucial, because you may have something on the board that you think we want to do that first year, but working with staff, we determine the realistic can't be done. That prevents policy decisions from wasting a lot of time and energy on something. It prevents staff from being stressed, knowing realistically they can't do something and trying to work hard to do something that can't be done. So annual goal setting is helpful in accomplishing those types of things.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Thomas, as a city manager, you notice a department that is not performing to your expectations or up to par, what would be your approach, to assist that department to improve in their performance?
Well, what I always like to initially do is in those first 9 days, I try to get a feel if there has been any goals set for the department directors already in place. And I try to look at those goals that are set in place and see how they're performing in that right off the bat. Secondly, I do establish my own goals for department directors that we work on, and we agree on this is what we're going to try to accomplish for the next year. And we measure those things on a monthly basis. And we begin to see progress, whether things are going good or not. If we're being successful, we make adjustments and we evaluate on that. If I come to a point of director is not, performing well, I develop a sort of a 3-month corrective action plan where I highlight some areas that we need to make adjustments on, things we need to improve on, and try to see if we can bring things back in line. If we can, we move forward. If we can't, then we mutually agree that we're going to have a parting of the ways.
Okay, thank you.
Final question. The city has several key positions that are vacant. One is assistant city manager. Would you, if you was selected, would you hire a city manager, assistant city manager?
Well, first, I would like to assess the organization before I make that determination. Shooting from the cuff, I've seen the assistant position, been here for a number of years, but I've also managed organizations larger than this without a full assistant. So I would have to assess what the duties are and the responsibilities are. So I would have to make that assessment once I got it. I can't give a full determination on it right now.
Thank you.
One way that we've done our utility development and other things is through grants. What's your experience in grants and what's your position as far as having a grant writer?
Well, I think having a potential centralized grant writing position to assist all departments, I think would be very helpful. But because of what I observed meeting with department directors, because of budgeting, we've had a lot of directors who become experts at filling out and applying for their own grants. I've been involved in administering grants. I've never applied directly for grants, but I've been involved in giving direction to apply for the grant, making sure we're compliant with all the guidelines for the grant, the reporting, all those different types of issues. So ideally, having someone centralized to assist all different departments with their expertise, to look for grant opportunities, to apply for them, to deal with all the paperwork involved with them. But because the department directors are taking the lead and doing it here already, making sure they have the resources and making sure I help them make sure they're staying compliant with the reporting. That's the key part of it. Once you've gotten the grant, making sure you're doing all the proper reporting and the follow-up to keep the grant and be eligible for future grants.
Thank you.
I have one final question for me. When I was reviewing your resume and going through everything, you have a solid history working with a lot of different cities, a lot of different states. I noticed there's a little period of time where it looks like you took a break and you worked as a substitute teacher. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit, and I know she's looking at me. I was wondering if you could elaborate. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit about why there's that break there. What was your thought process? Why you weren't in an administration role?
Well, there were different times when you're working as a city manager. You work someplace 5-6 years, and you decide to do something else in your life. There was a period of my time when I was younger. I left local government. Personally, I got married. I don't know if I say that or not. And I went to the private sector, assisting my spouse in running her local business. And ran local business, and eventually business sold and moved back into the public sector. So it's always been consistent. My references outlined. I've left places in good standing and good relationships with the people I've worked with.
Very good, thank you.
And I have one final question for you, Mr. Thomas. I noticed in most of your past managerial positions, the clerk reported to, meaning the city clerk reported to the manager. Here in Lake City, the clerk reports to the council.
Mm-hmm.
In your management style, do you foresee, or in your past professional positions, have you had any difficulty with that? And what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, no, actually, not all the places I work with, the clerk reported to me. When I was in Rock Island, the clerk reported to the mayor and council. When I was in Macon, the clerk reported to the mayor and council. So I've worked in those different types of mixed environments. And my relationship with the clerk has always been that I would like to involve the clerk in the director's meeting, because I think it's successful that person understands what's going on in operations wise. And also that person's the key to decision maker and helping me formulate the agendas to help us plan out things we want to bring to the council, operations, potential policy making decisions and have impact on operations. So I see that as a relationship that can be easily developed and worked on.
Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to ask us?
I think I've had those individual conversations with you, so I don't have any other follow-up questions right now.
Does anybody else have any follow-ups that they thought about? I think it's concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Norlock?
So, Mayor and Council, we've concluded our interview with Mr. Thomas, and just want to give you an update on where we are in our process. We provided background reference comments to each of you. I think you got a copy of that. We had one additional reference that we added to Mr. Thomas's list of references. The reason for that was we had reached out to everybody at the same time. There was a delay in one person calling us back, but because they took the time to do that, we felt it was only right that we include them and added that to his references. Background checks, we did a level 1 background check, which is, I would say, kind of a basic background check. That's where you check education and criminal and civil records and motor vehicle reports and education and all kinds of things. We have completed the background check on Mr. Adams. It went fairly quickly, which I wasn't surprised at because of his military background. Mr. Thomas's background is about 90% completed. There are only 2 records that are outstanding, and those are from Cook County, Illinois. The latest report that we got was that those should be finished. One should be finished no later than the 21st and the other no later than the 24th. I don't have any concerns about these. I believe both are civil records, if I'm not mistaken. However, as with any candidate that we would move forward, whether my background was completed or not, there's still other things that have to be done on the candidates as part of the city's onboarding and hiring of a candidate. So any discussions that we have from this point going forward about a candidate to move them forward and to consider them further, everything has to be contingent on everything clearing, not just my level 1 background, but whatever the city does in addition to my level 1 background. And I'm not familiar with that, but I suspect it may include things like drug testing or physicals or maybe a deeper level of a background check. But just wanted you to know where we are and that I don't have any concerns about where we are, but anything that we talk about going forward needs to be contingent on everything clearing. So, Mayor, that said, I don't know if you want to take a break or if you want to move forward to debriefing right now. What I would like to do is, at a minimum, determine whether or not there's a particular candidate that you want to move forward for further consideration, which would be the next step of talking about an offer and an agreement, or whether or not you wanted to go through and talk about candidates specifically, about areas of strength for each candidate or areas of concern that you have for each candidate. If you feel like we have a consensus, or if you want to find out where everybody is ranking candidates and just go with that before we go into detail, that's fine. Either way, what I'm looking for at this point is direction from you on if there's a particular candidate that you would like to move forward and who that is. In addition to that, I will ask you for a point person, a contact person for negotiations going forward. I'm obviously involved in negotiations and working with the candidate as a third party to make that happen, but I need a representative on behalf of the city to be that point person. What I would suggest also is parameters of an offer, that you establish it here so we don't have to come back to council for each individual item. Maybe if it's just the component of an agreement or something like that. And as I mentioned, there's a contingency that needs to be included in that, any conversations that we have going forward. The other thing I will say is as we move forward, I would need to know, should we not be able to come to an agreement with the selected candidate, does the council want us to then enter into negotiations with the second candidate? So with that, Mayor, I'll turn it over to you and just give me some direction on how you'd like to move forward.
Okay. But I guess the first item that I'd like to take up is our point person, and I'd recommend that be our attorney, Caroline, because that's kind of where we've always done it. So has anybody got any different opinions on that, or?
I think it would be appropriate.
Okay.
The attorney.
Mayor, my position would not be one that would include the amount of time or the amount of compensation, amount of time off, PTO, whether it be sick leave or anything, and compensation. I would bring back what the candidate wants to present to the council. So if you're looking for someone to talk back and forth with the candidate, that would not be the city attorney when it comes down to details as far as compensation.
I agree with that, and I think we can give you some guidance, and like you say, you can go talk to them and then come back to us. Anybody got any input on that? All right, so there we are. What, do y'all want to make a decision today, or try to make a decision today, or y'all want to kick it around a day or two and come back some other time?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure with the timeliness of the other interviews that the candidates have that we should delay too long. I think we should come to some decision. I'd like to see us be able to come to something that would hopefully be unanimous. I think both candidates have some really strong points. I would think both candidates could do this job from talking to them and seeing them in action. I think the mention that Ms. Darlock made on possibly negotiating with a backup, just in case one of them declines, whichever one we choose, I think that might make sense. Because what I'd not like to see is us get to the end and not get either of them, because that would not be good. I'd like to hear some more about what everyone thinks and who they think the top choice is. Maybe we can move forward that way. Initially I was of the mind, I think Mr. Bowden mentioned of having everybody together. I know finding more information why that couldn't be in the job market, how it is. I think if we would have delayed for that, it would have been, not to our benefit to hire either of these gentlemen. But from my perspective, I'd like to see us move forward so we can get going.
Well, I was absolutely impressed with both of them. I think they both have a lot of experience, which is, one of the big things for me is, they've been in those leadership positions and they've dealt with these type of things that they'll have to face. And, absolutely, whatever we choose, I think was said at the other meeting, it's like 1A and 1B instead of ranking much. And so if we make a choice and we can't negotiate with that one, I'd like us to move to the other one. And I think either one, like I say, I think either one of them can do the job. If we can do something today, I'm willing to do that. If everybody like to kick it around, we can get back quickly.
I had another question too. She mentioned something that jogged my memory. So on the background checks, I think, has the police department started that process yet on the two candidates, or no? So we'd want to get that process started too. And I think that would be something, we're going to do deeper than a level 1 background. Obviously, that's not going to be acceptable for what we're doing because we want to make sure what we're dealing with. So I think we need to give direction also to the chief and say, what can we do time frame wise? Because if we've got a 1A or 1B and the one doesn't pass, I'm not sure that we shouldn't start on both of them tentatively just to say, we're not falling behind.
Right.
I would think maybe too, having the salary structure in place is kind of crucial. I know, I think that's going to be a key piece. Maybe we can't come to terms there. Looking at the budget and what we can afford, that's another piece. I'd like to hear everybody else's thoughts on, what they think about that.
Well, my opinion is both candidates We're good candidates. Both of them had experience. But Mr. Thomas has, to me, a little more experience in utilities, finances. He's been several city managers in a lot of different locations. And I think he would bring more to the table for what we're looking for as a city manager. And that's just my opinion.
Chief, do you wanna kind of give us an idea of where y'all are and what we, could expect coming up and how you, if you have some questions for us?
We received the level 1 from the company. My lieutenant and sergeant have already put it aside and gone over that. We've actually already figured out whichever candidate you choose, how they need to travel, and the quickest way to get it done. So as soon as I get direction from the council, if it's one candidate, I will get them going as soon as we can get lights or driving, get the hotels checked. But actually, we've canceled some training for the department because those individuals are 2 of my trainers also. And we wanted the calendar clear so we could work on this as a priority. So as soon as I get direction, we'll start on it first thing. The city attorney has the release that they're working on so that we can get it signed to get their information. Once we have that in hand, we'll be moving forward with your direction.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I think for meeting with both of them and hearing both of them speak, I was a little slightly more impressed, I think, with Mr. Thomas and with his ability and history and economic development. I think the ability and his history with utilities, and especially the one-on-one here, some of the things he's done, I mean, I would slightly lean to him. I mean, it's very slight. I think personality-wise, they're very different. I know that's one thing you could tell from meeting with them. I think with where we're at moving forward, I mean, again, I think either one could be successful, but in my opinion will be that Mr. Thomas would be the direction we would move forward with.
And I agree with that, Mayor. Those were my thoughts as well. The things that we're dealing with, our city, and matching up to the experiences that both of those candidates had. In my opinion, Mr. Thomas has been more exposed to the challenges that we have faced in the past and that we are facing now. I just feel that, and not taking anything away from the other candidates, I think both well qualified, had some good experiences, but his experiences seems to relate more to specifically what we are faced with, right now. But either one, I feel that can do a good job for the city. But Mr. Thomas would be my number 1 choice.
Okay. And I'm kind of like Mr. Bowden said, you interviewed one a week ago and then today, and I'm trying to make sure I didn't do that because of first impression or last impression, but I was very impressed with Mr. Thomas and his experience with communities. And I think that's where he has some advantage because of more experience in that thing. So I kind of agree. It seems like we kind of have a consensus going here.
I would think so. I think too, another point, and I don't know how much we got out of the interview on this, but in my notes too, the full service utility piece and his experience there to me is a big deal. And the breadth and depth of him working between a city and county that had opposing views, but bringing them together, to me, that's a big deal. And I think we do have a consensus. I mean, I don't know, salary wise, I think that's going to be really the question when we go into the negotiation. I think that's going to be our limiting factor. Also, the other thing is either one of these candidates are moving a long distance. I don't know what we've done in the past as far as a relocation agreement. I would expect that we would be doing something for that. And I don't know what they did the last time.
Well, in the past, we have paid for on the move to relocate.
Yeah, there was some assistance in relocating in the past.
If I could have just a minute, Mr. Bowden asked me earlier if we were gonna make a decision, he wanted to speak. If we wasn't gonna make a decision today, he didn't want to speak. So it looks like we're getting close.
Yeah, it sounds like you already made a decision. No, I'm good, Mr. Evans.
Okay, you had asked that, and it seemed like we got there real quick, and,
Well, I tell you what,
okay,
no, I'm good.
okay. I would think, as far as the basic package, as far as time off, things like that, what we did for, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Heffelberger, I think it's probably pretty consistent, as far as I know. I think we could at least start there. I think the bigger thing, maybe more important, is the actual salary. It's kind of hard to do it here, because then they know where we're at.
That's right. I think maybe requesting a number and then decide might be the better way, because if we give a range is in public and they'll just go right to the top of the range.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what I would do in a negotiation, because
That's what he has experience in the past.
exactly, and that's exactly what happened the last time we hired someone. They went to the top number. So I think what we do is reach out and see, and is that normally, this might be a question for Renee.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. We want to try to minimize having to come back for every item
Right.
as much as possible. So appreciate that you're talking about relocation and other things and paid time off. When it comes to salary, it's okay to state a range if you want to, but again, it's going to be public. So you can kind of expect where the top of that range is where candidates are probably going to want to land, unless they want to go beyond that range. Now, if you establish a range or a number, and they want to counter, that's perfectly acceptable. That happens all the time. That would require us to come back to council for approval on anything beyond the number that you establish here or the range that you establish here. I want to mention relocation real quick. What I've seen in that regard, some organizations just decide to pay a flat fee. Just here's the relocation amount. Do with it what you will. Get temporary housing here, move your stuff, whatever you need to do. Others actually break it down and say, here's a certain amount for temporary housing. Here's a certain amount for 2 travel trips back and forth, one to get a place to live, one to sell a place to live. And then here's the actual moving expenses, bring us 3 bids, bring us 3 reputable companies, we'll take the lowest bid and we'll pay that. Whether you go flat fee on a relocation or whether you break it down, I highly encourage you to put a stipulation on any relocation that you offer. The reason why is because in years past, everybody wanted to come to Florida and they would use cities and counties to get down here and pay relocation, and then they would go work for somebody else, go find another job. So there needs to be some contingency on any relocation that you do provide, that if the candidate leaves within 2 years, they reimburse you a certain percentage, whatever that may be, 50, 75%. 3 years, the same. And then once you get out to a certain point, no reimbursement. But we've just seen that abused over the years in Florida in particular. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So it should be some contingency tied to any relocation. Regarding paid time off, typically managers don't come in at the same level that a new hire does at a frontline kind of position, a brand new hire that's never been with the city before, because they've built up time off where they are. Matter of fact, they probably have vacation plans already in place, maybe paid for the coming year. So there needs to be some element of some time off, which I know you referenced that your former agreements had that in it. So I do support doing that. Also, contributions to retirement, contributions to 401ks, any kind of contributions that the city may make, that's going to be of interest to the candidate. And that may be a way to offset salary if we can't get to where they want to be salary-wise. And I've had conversations with these candidates already that this is typically your comfort level as far as the salary is concerned, and that's just based on where you've been in the past. Some of them have been at a higher level in different places that they've been. They sort of understand where you're coming in at and have a comfort level with that. So I imagine they'll try to bump it some, and get, a little bit higher than what you probably have paid in the past. But I don't think it's going to be, a ridiculous amount, or they're going to be, way out of the ballpark or anything like that, because we've already had preliminary conversations about that. So your question was really about, do you get a number or a range? That's really up to you. I mean, with a range, we stand a chance of landing in the range. With a number, there's a good chance that, we may have to come back to council for negotiations on that. So range gives you a little bit of room, but again, it's all public. They know where it is. And, I don't think that helps you at all, council member, I'll tell you.
No, yeah, that's a lot.
Well, I think the time off and all that, I think that's be pretty consistent with what we've done unless they did. Now, with the retirement, we're with FRS, and I don't know if Mr. Helfenberger did it under that. I think, Mr. Johnson did something else because of his unique situation.
Yes, Mr. Johnson had his own plan, and Mr. Helfenberger did go with FRS, because he was already under FRS before, so he could add all those years to his retirement.
Right, okay, thank you. Donna, do you know what we paid for relocation on those?
I want to say it was around, that's been a while, but I want to say it was around $3,000 to $5,000.
And it was just a flat amount?
I think he gave us the tickets, and we just paid, reimbursed him for whatever his tickets were. But it wasn't extravagant or anything like that. It was just regular, normal stuff.
And I will remind you, these folks are coming from longer distances,
right,
where he came from, but that's something to consider too.
I have no idea what relocation costs would be.
I think on average, I'm thinking around $10,000, some a little bit higher, some not so
that's
high.
kind of number I was just thinking. I think I would go along with that number. And if he says it costs more than that and all, then certainly we'd be willing to do it. But I think that's a pretty good number coming from where he's coming from. And our salary before with Ms. Helfenberg was roughly 120.
Yes.
So I'd say, I mean, that's the bottom. So we could start there and you find out where he wants to go from there. And if he wants, something over that, then we can certainly. Yeah, but that's what, I think he's aware that that's what we were paying before.
Yes. So. The good news is that's public too, so everybody knows. What I typically like to do is just ask the selected candidate, what's your wish list? Knowing you're not going to get everything, what's your wish list? And at least it helps me to kind of compare what I know you've done or you're willing to do to what they would like to see. And then we kind of meet in the middle, if you will. And, I can bring back, a recommendation on that and work with the attorney to bring a recommendation.
Today's Wednesday. I don't think I have a problem meeting Friday afternoon later. I'm not sure. Or Monday afternoon. What is Monday? What's the date of Monday? 24th.
Another thing, Mayor, is I want to point out that Mr. Thomas was not able to bring his spouse with him on this trip. The timing was such that they have a daughter who's a senior in high school who the wife is staying back and taking care of her. However, I'm sure if you're moving your family to across country, I'm sure they will want to make a trip here as a family. So that would really be kind of the next step. Once we've, started the negotiations, understand that we're getting to an agreement, is to have the family come back and the city pay for that, for them to come and learn what they need to learn and acclimate and just make sure that
look at the housing market.
Look at the housing market.
Should we have a meeting like next Monday or hold up till there's been a little more negotiating?
We can accomplish a lot in a few days. So I think maybe a meeting on Monday would be fine to address where we are in the process. And I'll get as much information as I can, not only about the different components to an agreement, but also about the availability of him and his family to come for an on-site visit for a few days and hang out. They need to look at everything. You know, they need to come and just check the community out and feel good about the transition here. Because while you're hiring an individual, you know, it's important that on a personal level, this fits Mr. Thomas's needs also.
Do y'all think if we had a meeting Monday at 6, that maybe we could iron out a couple of the things that he might could give us now, and then maybe not finalize, but at least get some more breath?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I think so.
And Ms. Sykes needs to know so she can get a notice out, so. Let's shoot for that, and if something comes up, if we don't need it, then we can always cancel, but hopefully we'll be able to make some progress. Does that sound?
Yes, sir. That sounds fine. Thank you for the direction. I appreciate it.
And Chief, I guess that would give you where you need to be. Mr. Sampson mentioned doing checks on both anyway.
I'm not sure. Maybe that by the meeting Monday, we would know for sure. But I think go ahead and proceed on. That's right.
Okay. We'll have to get the release signed from him for that particular check.
That'd be kind of important.
Right, which should not be problematic, but we'll get on that right away. And I think it's important that if you're not focused on a particular candidate, that you not dig down that deep, because it becomes public record. And if they're not your candidate, then why would you want to do that, right? It's not that there's anything to hide. It's just, you know, why do that? So I think it doesn't take them long to do that deep dive. So again, if we have to shift to the next candidate, I'll go ahead and get the release form signed so that doesn't hold us up. But my recommendation is they wouldn't start on it until then, but I'll turn it over to the chief now.
Chief, you got any questions?
Yeah, I got notified by Mr. Corbelin's office, the release has been prepared. So if you're gonna go with Mr. Thomas, I could have him sign it while he's here.
Right.
That way, as soon as you're ready, I've got the signed form, and we can hit the ground running.
Okay.
That would be good.
Good.
All right. I think we got things going. Anybody got anything else?
Mayor, we just have a consensus to,
I guess we need a motion to.
yeah, I would like a motion so I can formalize it.
All right.
I'd make the motion that we would pursue a contract agreement with Mr. Thomas as our next city manager.
Second.
And, okay, we got a motion and a second. And comments. I think we were very fortunate. I think Ms. Norlock did us a great job of getting us good candidates. And I think we've had 2 good ones. And I'm glad we have a consensus of the 4 of us moving forward. Ms. Sykes, we call the roll.
Mayor, may I just clarify something? We also want to do the point of contact as Mr. Coberline.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we could amend the motion to include that.
Okay.
And then what about the concurrences for the things that they're going to go ahead and start the negotiations with, like the time off, the relocation with the contingency, the potential 120 salary? Do you want all those things in the motion as well, or?
Negotiable items.
I think, yeah, they're negotiable items, so.
Nothing hard, but just negotiable.
A framework. So the relocation, I think we're talking about 10,000 roughly.
Unless he comes back.
With the contingency.
Yeah, contingency.
Okay.
And as always, there's a contingency on the completion of the background check that the chief's doing.
Give me just a minute, Mayor.
Okay.
That's part of your motion as well. Part of your motion also going to be authorize the chief to move forward with the background on Thomas.
That's correct.
Okay. So we have a lot in this.
Yeah.
I'll write it all up and, okay. Mr. Sampson?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Jefferson?
Yes.
And Mayor Witt?
Yes. All right. Good day. We'll be adjourned till Monday.
Oh,